we have seen these complaints about EVs and solar and the battery lithium. This is a very interesting complaint as I see it. It's a little bit like, okay, you are entering a race and say, hey, you just run too fast. Can you just slow down a little bit? Let's start over the game. You don't ask them to slow down. You just catch up.
Well, just to take your analogy of sports a bit further, there has to be some rules, right?
The fact is, in many different areas, like this EVs and stuff, China has catch up now. It's really important to realize you're facing different competitors now. And we're in a very different world.
Hello, I'm Bryony Worthington, and this is Cleaning Up. While the drama of the US election was unfolding, I was in China. And for this week's episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Professor Xi Ye, a climate policy veteran who's had a ringside seat during China's rapid shift towards a clean energy economy. As Fatih Birol, head of the International Energy Agency, has said, we're now in a world where almost every energy story is essentially a China story. And it's a complicated story. Powered by vast supplies of coal, China's economy has grown rapidly, with per capita levels of energy consumption now matching Europe's, but making it the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Decades of investment in hydro, solar, wind, cleaner coal, and nuclear has reduced the carbon intensity of China's power grid to around 560 grams per kilowatt hour. And at the same time, it's increased the share of electricity in total energy to around 28%, thanks to a rapid uptake of electric vehicles and increasing use of electricity for heating. Domestically, then, China is likely, if it continues on its current trajectory, to peak its greenhouse gas emissions from energy soon. And increasingly, it's also playing a role beyond its borders. In 2023, for example, 20% of the global EV export market belonged to China. As Professor Xi and I discussed, while not everyone is happy buying clean technologies from China, the US, Europe, India, all are imposing tariffs to keep cheaper products out of their markets. Elsewhere, mutually beneficial partnerships are being developed. As countries embrace the opportunity to become more self-reliant in energy using cheaply manufactured solar cells, batteries, electric vehicles, and heat pumps. As Professor Xi points out, we only win on climate when the clean energy revolution is as widespread as the industrial revolution it seeks to replace. Whether and how quickly this can happen is still very much an open question. But we do now have access to low-cost, clean energy, and this changes the game. To discuss all this and more, please join me in welcoming Professor Xi to Cleaning Up.
Professor Xi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure.
Really looking forward to this conversation. And I wanted to begin, as we always do, by you just introducing yourself and telling us what you do.
Well, I'm a professor. I teach environmental policy, climate change policy, and currently with the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology in Guangzhou. It's a new campus. And we started this new area of study that we call thrust, a thrust of carbon neutrality and climate change. And we actually have a whole area, we call it Society Hub, including some other areas like innovation policy, entrepreneurship, and financial technology, urban governance and design. So that's what I do, right?
Fantastic. Right. And we first met in 2015 when you were involved in a report that the Foreign Office had commissioned on climate risk.
True.
And at that point, you were at the Brookings Tsinghua Public Policy Institute, is that right?
Well, 2015 was the second year I joined the Brookings Institution as a senior fellow, and I was directing the Brookings Tsinghua Center for Public Policy. I was also a professor in the School of Public Policy and Management in Tsinghua University. Exactly right.
Yeah, and that report, I remember that report very well because it was an international effort to consider climate change from the perspective of risk. How do you see climate risk? What was important about that report? Why did you feel the need to do that report back then?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of background about that work. This was September 2013. Back then, Sir David King was just took a position with as a special envoy representing the British government. And he called some of us, including Dan Schrank, and
He was at Harvard, is that right? Dan Schrank at Harvard, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Harvard University, and he's a geologist working on this long-term climate change, of course. So I was quite surprised that, and me trained as an ecologist working on climate change, we never actually look at this issue of risk in the kind of a perspective that David King, Simon Sharp, they are look at. It's very surprising in a way that climate change is a risk, and this risk can actually cause this just tremendous damages to interruptions to our life and also to the future generations in so many different areas. The ecosystem, biodiversity, and the ocean, the atmosphere, climate, everything will change. Public health is something that we have witnessed. So when we get together and we begin to look at what we are so used to do on climate change, and everything turns out to be quite fresh, from this perspective. So we're thinking about we no longer just look at the so-called scientific fact and truth. Rather, we want to look at this thing as how this would affect our lives, affect our ecosystem, our climate.
And just to unpack that a little bit more, essentially by taking a risk framework, you're not looking at averages or the most likely scenarios. You're also taking into account the less likely but really damaging tail risks, the sort of more extreme, so that you can try to reduce your exposure to those less probable but very impactful risks. Is that
exactly right? I like the way you put it. We actually call it the low probability but high impact. This would be something like when we're buying our insurance, right? You buy insurance for your house and for, say, the fire hazard. And you do not look at that as an average. You look at the something that, okay, if something like that happens, can you afford it? Can you deal with it? And if not, and how much are you willing to pay for that kind of potential risks? So that's something, we normally do not, as scientists, we normally do not look at this climate change risk that way, right? We look at the averages and we look at the most likely scenarios and what would happen. So that's quite a big difference. Right?
And so if you took more of a risk-based approach, what would be the practical changes that we might do? Would we be could it affect public policy if we took this approach?
Well, you certainly would take this climate risks a lot more seriously than what we are doing so far. Right? What we're doing, like the last week when UNEP released the most recent gap report, and very unfortunate that using the current policy in all different countries. And that will lead us to roughly 3 degrees of temperature rise by the end of this century rather than 2 degrees, and not to mention the 1.5. Right? So that is something we expect just following the policy that we have been doing right now. But if we take this risk approach, and we'll see that the 3 degrees, this is a likely case, by the way. This 3 degrees, can we afford it? What kind of the damages and loss we will be facing of that? Then we probably will reflect whether or not that policies are actually appropriate. And now, this will also take us to the next step. 3 degrees, based on that UNEP report, is the average. Then if we take that to the extreme, to something that's possible, maybe not likely, that possibility, well, maybe 4 degrees, maybe 5 degrees, right? Then the then that kind of scenario is something that is possible. They will probably will take further step to reconsider whether or not what we have been doing and in responding to climate change, and we probably have to take a lot more proactive approaches. Right?
And just to unpack that, why there's this range? It's not so much to do with our understanding of how quickly we might be able to change our energy systems. It's to do with the inherent uncertainties of climate responses. Is that right? That there are certain things we just don't know how the planet will respond to these elevated greenhouse gas concentrations, these elevated temperatures, the potential for tipping points. It's all of those uncertainties that gives you the range. Is that correct? It's not that we think we're going to burn millions and millions of tons of coal. I mean, it's just that the system itself is hard to predict.
I think that range of uncertainty has to do with two different sides of the variables. The first side of the variable is this natural variability, right? Then let's say you have a sequence of actions, then the nature will respond in a certain way, and that response will bring in some kind of uncertainty. So that's a generic response from nature. There is a range of uncertainty back. The second side of the variable is our understanding what's going on, right? Our understanding may be incorrect, unprecise, and then that also bring in a certain level of uncertainty. If we take this path to consider the possibilities of action, possibilities of policies, whether or not you can take that, that's probably add in another layer. For instance, now we're talking about climate change policies. Then one of the major emission emitters in the world, the United States. We know for sure there will be a new president, but we do not know who that person is.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about politics in a second.
Sure.
But because I should say to our audience, we're recording this in China just days before the US election. So it's the subject of a lot of conversation.
Yeah, I know.
But we'll come to that. So, but here we are in Nanjing, and the topic of the conference that we're at is how do we speed a global transition to a clean energy system? And a number of people have quoted Fatih Birol, the head of IEA, in saying that the global energy transition is a China story. Is that how you view it? Is it a story about China?
Well, I do not really know the very context of that, but I think China certainly play a very important role in that in many different areas, like solar and wind and EVs and batteries in these very different areas. China has a bigger share of the market and have a different lead in the technology and particularly deployment. In that sense, I think China certainly is playing a very different role. But energy transition is not a story for a single country, even for China. It's energy transition must take place in every corner of the world, and it takes the whole world working together and to make it happen. Just like what happened in the UK, right, 200 years ago, in this industrial revolution, when the burning of coal for this driving this big machinery, right? It's only until when this kind of technology spread over beyond the UK, beyond Europe, and it goes everywhere in the world, then we have this global industrial revolution, and we have a different world. Transitioning away from coal, from fossil fuel, to achieve the kind of energy transition we want, it takes every country to work together.
work together, or maybe perhaps slightly compete with each other? Perhaps I'm being a bit unfair, but it seems that the moment we're entering a period where there's a bit of a race going on, a little bit of distrust creeping in. So is it about competing or collaborating?
That is the kind of a competition we would love to see, right? It's racing to the top rather than racing to the bottom. We had so much racing to the bottom already. The 16 years ago, when we see this earlier generation of entrepreneurs, when they started working on solar panel technologies and companies, and we saw that kind of a competition among the companies, different kind of companies. They're all trying to be the number one, the most efficient, therefore the most profitable companies back then. And for instance, in Wuxi, Santec back then was the leader in this industry. Then later we see that the leader is replaced by the later latecomers, then Yingli later, then LDK, and now we have many more of companies working in that area. In this competition among the different companies, in this competition among different research groups for higher and higher efficiency of conversion of solar energy, and we now see we almost reached this theoretical physical limit of the efficiency now. This is exactly the kind of competition we would like to see, and because we really need this kind of competition.
And the effect of that is, of course, that the costs have famously come down now to such a point where it's the cheapest possible and quickest.
Exactly. That's
right.
That's exactly. I mean, so speaking of a learning curve, right? This is it's really amazing. It's really amazing. But 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, we're talking about solar, wind. You say, well, this will be cheaper than coal-fired power generation. Probably very few people would believe that is the case.
And yet here we are with now gigawatts coming in every year.
Yes, it's amazing.
Of the price.
It's amazing. Right.
But what would you say to people who would say, okay, China's benefited from this competition or this kind of directed competition? That there's a plan in place. There are government targets. The companies compete, but it's had an effect of probably undermining or taking jobs away from, say, Germany or the US, where they had also had manufacturing of solar, but couldn't compete on the global. And there's been a sort of bit of a backlash then against this idea that that there are no manufacturing jobs in other parts of the world. They're all in China.
Right. Well, this just reminds me the early days when China just started opening up. And a lot of people back then were complaining. They say, "Oh, this is too expensive." China imports a lot of equipment back then, from Japan, from Europe, from the United States, and now things have changed. I think this is a process of industrialization, process of transfer of technology, and there are winners and losers. When China started this whole thing of solar industry, solar panel, solar PV industry, this is most of the technologies were transferred. Then you spend a lot of money to buy the silicons, the raw, the equipment to process the raw materials and stuff. And then it just over time, and because of the scale of the market, because of the technology, because of the cheap labor and the cheap environmental cost, then it just gradually, step by step, to achieve where they are right now. And in this process, it's really not without cost. And this is we know this is an extremely energy-intensive industry. And back then, if you ask, let's say, the people who are complaining now and say, okay, let's put this industry in your hometown, or in Germany, or in Japan. Probably not that many manufacturers wants to do this. It's extremely energy intensive. It can be quite polluting in many different regards. So it is not a simple winning. There has been huge costs to the process, including the cheap labor, right?
I mean, we could have a conversation about some of the accusations about the labor conditions and maybe rather than go there,
right.
Perhaps it's also worth reflecting on the fact that for China, this was seen as a way of gaining a new market that was going to be a future market that no one yet controlled, and that there was a really clear imperative for China in that the demand for energy was rising very fast, and there wasn't that much in the way of domestic energy sources, only coal.
Very true.
So we looked at electric cars, for example.
Right.
That was clearly a strategic decision to try to make the energy more secure, more domestically controlled, rather than relying on imports.
Right.
And other countries didn't take that approach. Right. The US had its own oil and gas.
Sure. Yeah. You're talking about this labor condition. The way I look at it is not just a labor condition, as it's more like in the economy, where you are on a certain level of stage in development, and at that particular stage, and the labor cost, the environmental cost, the cost for energy and other resources are different. They're just simply different. With the salary levels, so on and so forth, they're just different. Now, the EV is a very interesting story. Also, it was not an immediate success at the beginning. It also took the industry a long time, took the government a long struggle, and in this whole process, there were a lot of problems. Problems dealing with the subsidies, for instance, right? How will you design the subsidy that you can actually to incentivize the purchase, incentivize the manufacturing, innovation of that. There were a lot of problems, and now we tend to see more on the successful side of the story rather than the failed side of the story.
Yeah, but I guess it's a complicated story.
It's a complicated story, right?
But here we are today now, where is it 1 in every 2 cars sold in China is electric?
Yes.
Yeah, and where you're based now in Hong Kong, I believe it's even higher.
It's even higher in the so-called Greater Bay Area, in this areas, Hong Kong, Macau, and 9 cities of Guangdong, and that is a warmer area and have much better facilities, the infrastructure over there, and people love to drive the EVs in that area. They're a lot more open, and they pursue different kind of fashion. What they consider to be cool to drive electric cars. A lot of young people there. Yes, that's certainly the case.
And the production now of electric cars in China has reached a really high level, hasn't it? The factories producing 1 million cars a year and more.
Yeah, then take the BYD, the leader of EVs here in China. Last month in October, they sold 500,000 cars. It's one company. And the previous month in September, they sold more than 400,000 cars.
Wow.
It's quite amazing.
I think possibly people can't quite understand the scale of how this transition is happening so fast in China. They might be underestimating.
Right.
When do we think China's demand for oil might peak? Because clearly it's a measure which will ultimately result in less imports of oil. Is there any data yet on?
Oh, I love that question, because when I was a student and we talked about oil peak, right? The so-called Hertzberg curve. And when we're talking about that, we're actually talking about the peak production
of supply. Yes.
Yeah, the peak supply. And now we are, we're talking about with the hope that one day we will get rid of petroleum, no longer use it. The peaking time is really hard to predict, and I made some mistakes in predicting the coal peak.
I think everyone's been caught out by that.
Yeah, a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Then it didn't really happen as I predicted. I thought 2013 would enter this plateau, and now it's a bit higher than that. But just like that, I would imagine the oil peak will probably come not in the not so distant future, and probably also in the way that you come to a high level and stay there for a number of years, and before it's actually declining and hopefully declining quickly.
Yeah.
Then oil is a little bit different than coal, in that a lot of oil is actually not just used for as a fuel, but also as a material for manufacturing
and petrochemicals.
So that's probably in it takes a little longer. We see a quick drop of petroleum.
Cleaning Up is brought to you by the members of our leadership circle. That is Actis, Ecopragma Capital, EDP of Portugal, Euroelectric, the Gilardini Foundation, KKR, National Grid, Octopus Energy, Quadrature Climate Foundation, SDCL, and Wärtsilä. For more information on the Leadership Circle, please visit cleaningup.live. That's cleaningup.live. If you're enjoying Cleaning Up, please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. That really helps other people to find us. Please recommend Cleaning Up to your friends and colleagues, and sign up for our free newsletter at cleaninguppod.substack.com. That's cleaninguppod.substack.com.
China's got this sort of head start in a lot of the technologies we're going to need for this global transition. But what we've seen now from perhaps from the West is the desire to sort of provide a bit of space for them to catch up. And so tariffs are being applied to the products of the solar panels and the electric vehicles. I mean, how is that perceived? And does that change anything about China's plans?
I think it really depends how we're going to approach this. I do believe China, both the government and the business sector, they really want to have collaborations, with Europe, with United States and other countries. And I have seen businesses, they wanted to have the manufacturing sites in the U.S., for example. And I've seen some deals they have trying to make, say, the electric vehicle companies, they're setting up their manufacturing sites in Europe. And also, of course, drawing the research and development facilities. I think these kind of measures would be very good for different countries for these international collaborations. And I certainly think this would be the way to go, because China's clean energy industry certainly benefited a lot, hugely, from the West, from the technologies in the early days. And if there is something that China can do in a way similar to, say, 20 years ago with the solar industry, with the wind industry, with the battery and the EVs, this certainly would be something that's very important to see.
I think there's something of a distrust, unfortunately, about the final product coming from China, the software or the devices within the vehicles. There is a little bit of a distrust about surveillance. Ironically, because we're all being surveilled everywhere in Europe and the US already, but having China have your data, there's a nervousness about that.
I know, and I know. This kind of thing has been being speculated for a long time, and especially right now is not the best time for this kind of final product transfer. But still, I don't think it's impossible. For instance, Tesla and set up the probably the largest the super factory here in China, in Shanghai, and despite the fact that there's so much a deep distrust between U.S. and China, and Tesla is flourishing very, very well. And in the past, I heard that some of the government were not allowing Tesla being entering into the government size. But now, even that, the Tesla is welcome everywhere. It's everywhere. And I know this kind of surveillance and even spying, right? This when was this? This was a number of years ago when we heard the story that some country was even taking this secretly videotaping or audio taping some of the conversations of the European leaders back then. Fortunately, this was I have not seen the stories that between China and Europe, and between China, China has been doing things like this. So I can definitely understand that the concerns, and especially with the current geopolitical situations, but I don't think it is that would prohibit the further collaboration.
I'm just thinking about the finished product of even software like TikTok. It's excited a huge debate about how much is TikTok gathering about people's behaviors and conversations.
I know. This is this TikTok thing in the United States, and I just had a recent visit there, and I was asking. I said, "Hey, I still see TikTok is going around." Then there are a lot of talks, in the Congress, in the government, but the young kids, they don't they don't care. They just still playing. As I said, I think the technologists are very smart. They can discover. They can just play TikTok and discover whether or not there are problems, with that kind of software. It's easy to do. It shouldn't be too difficult to examine that.
Right, and then enforce it. Yes. Well, so I wanted to change tack slightly and go back to sort of international climate change. And one of the things that we've seen recently was the Paris Agreement, which was seen as a success, really, of US-Chinese collaboration. And I wondered how it was viewed from China. What was China's reaction to the Paris Agreement and role that you saw China playing in that?
China sees the Paris Agreement is a major success in international climate governance, and to develop a consensus between the major parties for reaching the international agreement is indeed very, very difficult to do. It's a milestone. It was considered to be a milestone. Just remember the days before the Paris Agreement, And in November 2014, exactly 10 years ago, when then President Obama and President Xi get together in Beijing, they had a major announcement on U.S.-China agreement on climate change and clean energy. Then the next year is September 25th. The two heads of states get together in Washington, D.C. That's a joint presidential statement. And there were China, France, China, UK, China, Europe, that kind of bilateral agreement before the Paris Agreement. So it was a diplomatic success, and it was also a major success for the environment, certainly. So I think China take a significant pride of that the Paris process. And China, ever since the December 12th, 2015, China have been working. And even for this year, going next week, going to Baku, China is still repeating that we should stick to the Paris process, to the Paris Agreement. So that's trying to take this very, 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 very seriously. Right?
But how, just to question a little bit the fact that now we have a largely voluntary system where targets are set according to nationally determined contributions, and China's now committed to carbon neutrality by, I think, 2060. That might all seem like a success, but how do we hold ourselves accountable to those targets?
Well, this is something about the agreement itself and to the international negotiation process. Paris Agreement, it was not not something that designed to have this binding mechanism that is a voluntary system. It's based on this nationally determined commitments that you may, purely from the analytical point of view, you may see this as as some kind of flaw, design flaw there. That's a different story. That's the treaty itself. That does not really not really mean that the agreement itself is not successful. It only mean that this agreement, whether or not this agreement would be able to fix the problem we would like to fix. Right? That's I see that, from the political point of view or from the analytical point of view. We probably will have different conclusions of that. Right?
Because as we said at the beginning, the climate risk is not going away. It's getting much worse.
Right.
And in a sense, our climate talks now haven't got any, what are we going to be negotiating for going forward?
Right.
What's the next thing for our negotiations?
I think that's the most important question. The question is is not reflecting one particular agreement or one particular conference. Then it is this overall governance system to deal with the climate change. We should ask ourselves this question: does this international climate governance actually work? Right? Then on that, I am one of the pessimists. Then seeing this process has been going on for the last 30 years now, more than 30 years. Then we have definitely achieved a lot. And in that, we built a lot of agreement, and we built a lot of clean energy in the meantime. But we are farther away from the target, to control the temperature rising.
Yep.
So we're farther away. We're not getting closer. We're getting farther away. So that in that sense, I think our governance, we need to reflect on the efficacy of this governance system. And I think we have some serious problem with the current system.
And so thinking about upcoming conferences, we've got one in Baku coming up.
Right.
What would good look like? What new work streams could we then kick off?
There are each parties now actually already expressed what they expect, what they hope, they wish to come up with this. But the thing is, just like the gap report, right? You can see, okay, assuming we can achieve all of this, can we actually deliver that 2 degree or 1.5 degree target? I think that's probably a more fundamental question we should ask ourselves, or we should ask our negotiators. Assuming you can achieve your target, say on the financing, on technology, on updating the new commitment, can we achieve our target? Right. Now we're talking about a temporary rise, a likely temporary temperature rise of 3 degrees, right? Then, so the current framework and the current system probably, or in my view, most likely would not be able to bring that to bring the result as to deal with this 2.6, 2.8 degree temperature rise.
But what could we do differently? So do we need to have more sectoral approaches? We've talked in the past about the fact there are other UN treaties that exist, right? We have Montreal Protocol that controls certain types of gases. We have ICAO that looks after the aviation sector. Are there other places where we have different types of agreements that we could do more through? Is that something we should be thinking about?
Actually, I somehow have high hope with the younger generation now, and hopefully they will now just rise up and take the responsibility to carry over the process. Is that
fair, though, for us to say that it's on their shoulders?
Well, you see, this is I understand we have this older generation of climate negotiators and activists, and they have made a significant contribution to this process. But the thing is that we need some fresh blood in this process. And we need this young generation, because they will carry all this the consequences after all. And I would like to see more participation of them, and to bring in their agenda, their actions into this. And and I think that's the future of a new climate governance. Otherwise, we know all these friends, right? They have been working on this, and some of them run out of their energy, some of them run out of their ideas, probably.
There's obviously other ways in which countries collaborate. There are bilateral agreements between countries.
Yes.
And can you imagine how does China, for example, view Brazil and the emerging economy of Brazil, where you're trade partners and there's a lot of commerce that passes between the two countries?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think the collaboration between these two countries, Brazil and China, can have a great prospect in the future. Yesterday, you and I were talking about this aviation fuel, for instance, right? Then you can't really rely on China to come up with the production of this zero carbon aviation fuel in any near future to replace that. But Brazil can do that with much lower cost, and it's actually feasible. Just look at the this is the vast land mass and the climate, the experience that they have, the infrastructure, they probably can do this with a much lower cost. I mean, this is just one example. Right.
And so in that example of a bilateral collaboration, you might see Chinese electrification technology reducing demand for bioethanol, and then the bioethanol going into aviation, where China would be a buyer of that.
Yes, I think in an ideal world that would be great, and the vice versa. And China can work with Brazil to also electrify some of the automobile industry as well. But their automobile rely a lot more on their biofuel, which is great. But still, there is potentially there is a good application of electricity in the EVs.
Yeah, and Brazil has largely clean electricity at the moment as well.
Yes. Yeah. Then, but the thing is, this is Brazil is a country, is a major country with this extremely high level of biodiversity and the natural forest and the Amazon and the plant and animal species, and that I think we also need to think about not to how best to preserve that precious resources and the value of ecosystems. I think that's also important in the process of responding to climate change. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we touched on it earlier, but we are just days away from an American presidential election, and I'm curious as to how China is viewing that race. Is it something that's talked about? It's only been talked about in this conference, but what's how can we kind of respond to the fact that we're going to need to continue to see global leadership on climate change, and what's the kind of expected response if we got somebody in the White House who doesn't believe in climate change?
Well, in 2016, shortly after the new president emerged, the U.S. withdrew from the Paris Agreement. I think from the Chinese perspective, certainly wish to see someone to keep the Paris Agreement, for this process. And as I said, China takes this Paris Agreement very seriously, very, very seriously. I think that's secondly, and China, as I see it, would be keen on working together with the United States in developing these technologies for clean energy, for adaptation and the mitigation of climate change, and in many other areas as well. The U.S. By far is leading in so many different areas of technology, including that clean energy, including this AI and technology and so on and so forth. And we know, this so far, there's a small yard, high fence kind of a discussion strategy from the U.S. side. And personally, I would like to see a lot of collaborations, working together. I can understand there are certain areas that you have the concern for national security and others, but for those areas which you can clearly see is just beyond this small yard, and for those areas to to encourage them to work together.
What do you think the likelihood is then of the race to the top really being a race to the top and not a race to the bottom if we have a change of direction in the US?
Well, earlier you talked about this clean energy area. Then we have seen these complaints about EVs and solar and the battery lithium. This is a very interesting complaint as I see it. It's a little bit like, okay, you are entering a race and say, hey, you just run too fast. can you just slow down a little bit? Let's start over the game. We can actually play this game just like we play that in an Olympic, and we have seen a great Olympic in Europe earlier this year, and they would like to see that kind of spirit can be played in this area, dealing with the climate change and clean energy. Right, you don't ask them to slow down; you just catch up.
Well, just to take your analogy of sports a bit further, there has to be some rules, right? Because what the Olympic Committee would say is, you're not allowed to use drugs, you're not allowed to cheat. So, I mean, is there any justifiable criticism where you think, the West is right, China's been a bit cheating a little bit, and needs to perhaps slow down to acknowledge the fact that this has to be fair?
Right. I know. This year, that's a swimming race, right? There are lots of complaints about you have a lot of tests on the Chinese swimmers, which later proves to be unfair and unfounded. That was interesting. The fact is, in many different areas like swimming, like this EVs and stuff, China has catch up now. Has caught up now. I think it's really important to realize, you're facing different competitors now. And we're in a very different world. It's very, very important to adjust to this new situation. This new situation. This is just by accusing the competitor of you're cheating, you're doing something unfair. Well, that doesn't help. That does not help. So I think we are in a very different world. This is and in this new world, we actually can work together in a very positive and productive way. Right?
Well, I'm glad that you've got that hopeful message there. I mean, I suppose really, in real terms, things could change. The trade barriers could continue to go up, and we could go back to a smaller world, a less trade-oriented world. But then China has the natural advantage of a huge domestic market that it also can just continue to invest in for its own sake. And then, in a sense, what the rest of the world does, although it might slow China's plans down, you still have this ability to think long term. You're trusting in the science, and you have a domestic market to develop products to sell into. So does that mean China can just continue to run the race? And
no, I think what you said is all right, but this is a very interconnected, globalized world already. And you probably can go back, globalization a little bit, but the overall, I think the overall trend is we are growing into a more and more interconnected world, and China cannot do well without the close cooperation with other countries, and we should really take advantage of this interconnectedness.
So that was Professor Xi Ye, the director of the Public Policy Institute at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. As usual, we'll put relevant links in the show notes, and my thanks go to our videographer, Shi Yao Zhang, Oscar Boyd, our producer, Jamie Oliver, our editor, and the growing number of people that together make the Cleaning Up podcast and the Leadership Circle possible. Join us next week for another episode of Cleaning Up.
Cleaning Up is brought to you by the members of our Leadership Circle. That is Actis, Ecopragma Capital, EDP of Portugal, Euroelectric, the Gilardini Foundation, KKR, National Grid, Octopus Energy, Quadrature Climate Foundation, SDCL, and Wärtsilä. For more information on the Leadership Circle, please visit cleaningup.live. That's cleaningup.live. If you're enjoying Cleaning Up, please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. That really helps other people to find us. Please recommend Cleaning Up to your friends and colleagues, and sign up for our free newsletter at cleaninguppod.substack.com. That's cleaninguppod.substack.com.